quiet archive record. Tonight, we're stepping into a slow unfolding. Settle in, let the outside world dissolve, and gently descend into tonight's world. Around the world, people report animals that do not fit the official lists. Some of these reports are jokes, some are mistakes, and some are hard to dismiss with a simple shrug. A cryptid is not a proven species. It is an animal that is claimed, described, and sometimes supported by traces like tracks, photos, hair, or repeated eyewitness accounts, but not confirmed by an accepted specimen. Tonight, we will not chase every rumor. We will focus on the cases that have the strongest records, the ones with long timelines, multiple independent witnesses, and evidence that can be compared and tested. Some will likely have normal explanations. Some will remain unclear. Our goal is to treat the most compelling cryptid cases like a set of files on a table, each with its own weight, its own weaknesses, and its own unanswered questions. Tonight, we go through the most compelling cryptid cases in the world. To keep this calm and grounded, we need a standard. A compelling cryptid case is not the strangest story. It is the story that survives contact with ordinary explanations. It has repeat reports over years, not one night. It has details that remain stable across witnesses. It has physical traces that can be measured, photographed, or collected. It has a geography that makes sense. A swamp, a mountain valley, a deep forest, an ocean loch. And it has an honest admission of uncertainty. Because when someone is too sure and the evidence is weak, the file is usually hollow. So tonight, we will move through a set of well-known cases, but we will treat them with the same approach. What was reported? Who reported it? What physical evidence exists? What experts have said? What normal explanations can fit? And what is left? We will begin with the case that sits at the top of most lists. The North American Bigfoot, also called Sasquatch. The reason Bigfoot stays compelling is not because there is one perfect piece of proof. It is because the reports are widespread, long-running, and often detailed. For decades, people across the Pacific Northwest, parts of Canada, and other regions have described a large, hairy, human-like figure in forests. Many reports share the same core points. Tall, often said to be 6 to 9 feet. Broad shoulders, long arms, a fast, heavy stride, a strong smell in some cases, and an ability to vanish into deep terrain. Now, the strongest kind of evidence in Bigfoot cases is usually tracks. Footprints in mud or snow, sometimes with a clear outline. Some prints show ridges or skin patterns. Some show a mid-foot flex that some researchers argue is hard to fake. But tracks are also easy to hoax. A person can carve wooden feet. A person can press a pattern into soft ground. And once the idea is in a region, people may interpret bear tracks as something else. So tracks alone are not enough. Another kind of evidence is audio. Calls in the night, knocks on trees, strange howls. Some recordings are eerie, but forests are full of sound. Owls, coyotes, wolves, elk, and human pranksters. Audio is hard to confirm. Then there is hair. Over the years, people have collected hair they believe came from Bigfoot. When hair is tested, it often matches known animals. Bear, deer, dog, cow. Sometimes tests are unclear because the sample is contaminated or degraded. This is one reason the case stays unresolved. The evidence that exists often collapses into known animals. Now, there is one piece of Bigfoot history that is always mentioned: the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. It shows a large figure walking across a sandbar. Some people see a man in a suit. Some people see a non-human creature with an unusual gait. The film has been analysed for decades. The problem is that film, by itself, is not a body. It can never fully settle the question. So why is Bigfoot still compelling? Because there are credible witness types involved. Hunters, police officers, forestry workers, people who spend long hours outdoors. Not all are credible, but enough are that the pattern is hard to dismiss as only fantasy. Also, the terrain is vast. There are regions of forest and mountains where very few humans travel. Large animals can hide there. And the idea of a rare, elusive primate is not physically impossible. So the Bigfoot file remains open, not because it is proven, but because the volume and consistency of reports keep it alive. Now we move across the world to a related file, the Himalayan Yeti. The Yeti is often described as a large, ape-like creature in high mountains. The region is remote. The weather is harsh. Many reports are old, and local folklore blends with modern interest. One reason the Yeti case is compelling is that there are many unknowns in mountain ecology, and there are animals that are rarely seen. Large bears live in the region. Snow leopards move silently. In bad weather, a human can misjudge size and distance. Yet there are also stories of tracks in snow that seem too large for known animals. There are also museum samples and hair samples that were once claimed to be Yeti. When some of these samples were tested in modern times, results often pointed to bears. This does not prove there is no Yeti. It means the evidence that was called Yeti often belonged to known animals. Still, the remote geography and the long-running tradition keep the file from closing. Now we move to a case that feels different, the Loch Ness monster. The reason Loch Ness stays on this list is because it has a very clear setting, a single loch in Scotland, deep water, cold, dark conditions, a long history of sightings. If there is a large animal in the loch, it should be a simple question. Search the water. Scan with sonar. Look for DNA traces. Over the decades, many searches have been done. Sonar has detected large moving objects at times. Photos and films have been taken. Some are hoaxes. Some are mistakes. Waves, logs, boat wakes, birds. The famous surgeon's photo is widely considered a hoax. Yet the loch is large and deep enough to create strange visual effects. One of the most modern tools used is environmental DNA. Water can contain traces of DNA from animals living in it. If a giant unknown reptile lived in Loch Ness, it might leave traces. When eDNA surveys have been discussed, they have suggested known animals like fish and eels. Some have argued that large eels could explain some sightings. A big eel could surface and look like a hump. It would not explain every story, but it could explain many. So Loch Ness remains compelling as a cultural file and as a lesson in how a single place can hold a story for generations. Now we move to a case where the evidence is not about a body in a forest, but about a pattern of events, the Mothman of Point Pleasant. In the 1960s in West Virginia, people reported a large winged figure with glowing eyes. Reports came in a cluster. The sightings were linked in the public mind with fear and with a later tragedy, the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Now, the Mothman case is compelling to some because of the number of reports and the intensity, but it is also a case where misidentification is likely. Large birds can look monstrous at night. An owl or crane seen in headlights can have eyeshine. Fear can fill in the rest. So the strongest part of Mothman is not physical evidence, it is the social record. It shows how a community experiences a wave of strange sightings. It shows how events can cluster in time. It shows how a symbol can form. Still, because the sightings were reported by multiple people and were described with some consistency, the file stays in the category of compelling folklore rather than a single hoax. Now we move to a case that is both a cryptid and a known animal, depending on what year you look at. The thylacine, also called the Tasmanian tiger. This animal was real. It existed. It was filmed. It was photographed. It lived in Tasmania. And it is considered extinct. The last known captive thylacine died in the 1930s. Yet people have reported sightings for decades. This is a compelling cryptid case because it is not about an unknown type of animal. It is about a possibly surviving population of a known animal. That is a different kind of question. Could a small number have survived in remote areas? Tasmania has wilderness. It has rugged terrain, and rare animals can hide. There have been modern searches. There have been claims of camera trap images, often unclear. There have been reports by bushworkers. No confirmed specimen have been produced. But because the animal was real, the idea of survival feels more grounded. So the thylacine remains one of the most compelling cases on the list. Now we move to a case from Central Africa that is often described as a living dinosaur. Mokele Mbembe. The claim is that in parts of the Congo basin, there is a large animal in rivers or swamps, described with a long neck and a bulky body. The region is extremely remote. It is hard to access. It has been explored, but there are still wild areas. This case is compelling to some because of the geography and because local reports exist. But there are also strong reasons for skepticism. A large dinosaur-like animal would likely need a breeding population. It would likely leave bones. It would likely be seen and documented with modern tools. And many expeditions have not found conclusive evidence. Also, large known animals like elephants and hippos can create confusing reports. A hippo surfacing can look like a dinosaur back. A swimmer seeing a moving shape in water can misread it. So Mokele Mbembe remains a compelling story, but not a strong evidence case. Now we move to a case that blends evidence and confusion in a very modern way, the chupacabra. This file began in the 1990s and spread quickly. It is compelling because it touches real animal deaths. But the physical evidence that has been tested often points to known animals, usually conids with mange. So the chupacabra is compelling as a case study in how myths form and how real problems can be named by a monster. Now, we will expand the list to include cases that have strong local consistency. The orang pendek of Sumatra. This is described as a small, upright, ape-like creature. Reports come from dense rainforest. The region has known primates, and it has rare animals. Some researchers have collected footprints and stories. The compelling part is that the reports are often consistent, and the habitat could hide a small primate. The weak part is that there is no confirmed specimen. Still, among unknown primate cases, orang pendek often ranks high. Now, to keep the night flowing, we will move through more files, one by one, but always with the same calm questions. And as we do, notice a pattern. The most compelling cryptid cases are usually in places with two things: a lot of wilderness and a lot of human attention. Because without attention, no reports form. And without wilderness, nothing can hide. Now we will turn to the oceans, because many of the world's strongest mysteries live in water. But ocean cryptids are difficult. The ocean is vast. The water hides bodies, and whales and sharks can be misread. So we will be careful. One ocean case that has persisted is the idea of sea serpents. For centuries, sailors described long shapes in waves. Today, many of those reports can be explained by whales, oarfish, and wave patterns, but a small number remain unclear. Still, without a body, they remain in the story category. Now, take a slow breath. We have opened many files. Now we will go deeper. We will return to the strongest cases and describe them in more detail, with attention to the best evidence and the best counterpoints. Return to Bigfoot and make the file more concrete. Bigfoot reports go back well before the word Bigfoot was popular. Many indigenous cultures have stories of large forest beings. Those stories are not all the same, and they are not simply modern Bigfoot tales. But they show that the idea of a large, human-like presence in the woods is older than modern media. In the 20th century, reports became more uniform. Roadside sightings, footprints found near logging roads, stories of something watching from tree lines. There are also reports of structures made of branches, and reports of rocks thrown. The most compelling witness reports often share a calm tone. A driver sees a figure crossing. It turns its head. It steps into the brush. The witness is not screaming about aliens. They are simply shaken. But even here, there is a strong, normal explanation. A bear on its hind legs can look tall. A person in a costume can prank. And memory can shift after the fact. So the Bigfoot case, when handled carefully, is not one case. It is 1,000. And that is both its strength and its weakness. It is hard to fake 1,000 independent experiences. But it is also hard to control the quality of 1,000 reports. What would settle Bigfoot? A body, a skull, a clear DNA sample with a clean chain of custody. Until then, Bigfoot remains a compelling possibility, not a confirmed animal. Now move to the Yeti again, because it shows a similar pattern. The Yeti exists in a landscape that is dangerous and high. Humans there struggle just to survive, so the number of reports is smaller. But tracks in high snow have a certain power. A large print in a clean white field is hard to ignore. Yet bears in melting snow can leave confusing tracks. A bear track can stretch as snow melts. A bear walking can leave a line of prints that merge. So the same evidence can be read in two ways. When modern labs test hair claimed to be Yeti, they often find bear. This suggests a likely truth. Many Yeti reports are bear reports, but it does not close the file entirely. Because remote regions can hide rare individuals, and because folklore can hold a memory of something now gone. Now return to Loch Ness, because it is a case where science has repeatedly tried to test the claim. The loch is long and deep. It is fed by rivers. It has cold, dark water. A large animal could hide for a time. But for a breeding population, it becomes hard. A breeding population would need food. It would need genetic diversity, and it would leave traces. So, when people propose a prehistoric reptile, the weight of biology pushes back. Still, Loch Ness sightings continue. Many are likely wave effects. In long, narrow lochs, wind can create standing waves. A boat wake can travel and look like a moving hump. A deer swimming can look like a creature head. A seal can appear and vanish. And a large eel, as some have suggested, could explain a few cases. So the Loch Ness file remains compelling as a place where normal nature can create abnormal-looking scenes. Now we move to the thylacine, because it is the clearest example of the survival question. The thylacine was hunted, it was trapped, it was seen as a threat. The population collapsed. Extinction can happen fast, but extinction is also hard to confirm in wilderness. To say something is extinct, you must search and fail. And failing to find something is not the same as proving it is not there. This is why thylacine sightings still matter. Some come from people who know the bush. Some come with details like striping, a stiff tail, and a certain way of running. But there are also normal animals that can be mistaken. Dogs, foxes, even wallabies at certain angles. And there is another factor. Once people want the thylacine to be alive, they may interpret any odd sight as one. So the file remains open, but with a strict standard. A camera trap image that is clear, a scat sample that matches, a body. So far none have been confirmed, but among cryptid cases, the thylacine is one of the most compelling because it is grounded in a real species. Now we move to a case from North America that is less about a creature and more about a question. The so-called thunderbird. Reports describe very large birds, bigger than known eagles. Some stories are old, some are modern. A large bird seen at a distance can be misjudged. A bird with wings spread can look enormous. But there is also a reason the file persists. Birds can travel far. Rare individuals can appear. And certain species, like condors, have returned in some regions. If someone in the past saw a condor, it might become a thunderbird story. So this case is compelling as a reminder that even known animals can feel mythical. Now we move to the orang Pendek again, because it is one of the few cryptid cases that researchers have tried to pursue with a steady method. Sumatra is dense. It is humid. It is hard to see far. Animals can vanish behind leaves. Local people have stories of a small, upright creature. Some descriptions are consistent. Short, strong, hairy, walking upright. Not a gibbon, not an orangutan. Some investigators have taken footprint casts. Footprints can be faked, but consistent footprints over time become harder to dismiss. Still, the evidence has not crossed the line into proof. But as a case, it is one of the better ones, because it sits in a habitat where unknown primates are at least plausible. Now we move to a case from South America that is often exaggerated but has a core, the mapinguari. In some stories, it is a giant sloth-like creature. In others, it is a monster with a mouth in its belly. The folklore is mixed, but the compelling question is this. Could there have been a surviving ground sloth in parts of the Amazon in recent history? Giant ground sloths once existed. They went extinct. But the Amazon is vast, so some people keep the idea alive. Still, there is no hard evidence, so mapinguari is more compelling as folklore than as a physical case. Now we move to a case from the United Kingdom that has repeated sightings, but also repeated problems. Big cats in Britain. People report black panthers or large cats. Sometimes there are photos. Sometimes there are livestock kills. The compelling part is that large cats are not supposed to be there in the wild. But there are normal explanations. Escaped exotic pets, illegal keeping, misidentified dogs, and in some cases there have been confirmed escapes of exotic animals. So, while the idea of a breeding panther population is hard, the idea of occasional big cats is not crazy. This makes it a compelling case, because it may be true in a limited way. Now we move to the ocean again, but with a clearer target. The giant squid was once treated like a sea monster. Then bodies were found. Then it became real. This is important. It shows that some cryptid ideas can become confirmed when evidence catches up. So we should not assume every cryptid is fake, but we should also not assume every story is a clue. Now, take another slow breath. We have covered a set of cases. Now we will do something that makes this more useful. We will rank what makes a case compelling, not by fear, by evidence type. The strongest evidence types, in order, are usually a body, a clear DNA sample, a clear photo with scale and context, repeated independent sightings in one region, tracks with a good chain of custody, and then, finally, stories without physical traces. Using that list, the thylacine sits high because the animal is known and the question is survival. Bigfoot sits high because of volume and consistency, but it suffers from lack of a body. Orang Pendek sits mid to high because the habitat and reports are plausible. Loch Ness sits mid because science has looked and has not found a monster. But the setting still creates compelling stories. Mothman sits more in folklore because it has little physical evidence. Mokalambembe sits more in myth because the biological barriers are high. Now we will move into a quieter part of the night, where we talk about why humans keep seeing these things. This is not an insult, it is part of the case. Humans are pattern makers. We see faces in shadows. We see animals in brush. We fill gaps. And when we are afraid, we fill them faster. Add to that the fact that nature is full of rare events. A sick animal, an albino, a bear walking upright, a deer swimming, a seal far inland, a large fish surfaced and dying. Each rare event can become a monster story. And once the story exists, future rare events fit into it. Now, we will add more cases that many people consider compelling, but we will keep the tone grounded. The Jersey Devil. This is mostly folklore, with a long history. It has a strong cultural root, but it has little physical evidence, so it is compelling as a story, not as a zoology case. The Beast of Gévaudan. This is a historical case of killings in 18th century France. It is sometimes treated like a cryptid, but it likely involved wolves and possibly a large dog or hyena. It is compelling because the historical record is real, but it is not likely a new species. Now, as the night continues, we will do a deeper walk through a handful of the most compelling files, and we will treat each one like a careful report. We will start with Bigfoot again, but this time with a focus on the best kind of modern evidence, DNA. When people have claimed Bigfoot DNA, the results have not held up under strong review. Samples are often contaminated. They often match humans or known animals. This suggests either hoaxes or handling problems. So the Bigfoot case remains mostly in tracks and testimony. That is not nothing, but it is not enough. Now, one of the most important lessons from cryptid history is that real animals can be unknown to science for a long time. The okapi was once a rumor. The mountain gorilla was once a rumor. So the idea of an unknown animal is not foolish, but the unknown animals that become known usually leave bodies. They are not perfect ghosts, so the burden remains. Now, we will move into the final long section of the file. It will be a steady walk, case by case, evidence by evidence, and we will end with a simple conclusion. Most cryptid cases are not solved by one dramatic moment. They are solved by patient collection of evidence, or they remain unsolved because that evidence never arrives. consider another class of compelling cases: animals seen out of place. This is different from a full, unknown species. It is a known animal appearing where it should not be. This can happen through escape, release, migration, or rare wandering, and it can produce many cryptid reports. For example, the reports of big cats in North America outside their normal range. In some regions, people report black panthers. Mountain lions are real, but black mountain lions are not confirmed as a normal genetic form. So when people report a black cat, it raises questions. Some of these reports are likely misreads of dogs, shadows, or known cats, but some may be escaped exotic animals, and a small number could be rare melanistic individuals if such a trait exists in a related species. This category is compelling because it does not require a new branch of life. It only requires a rare event. Now look at another out-of-place case: the so-called phantom kangaroos in parts of the United States. People report kangaroo-like animals. This sounds silly, but pet kangaroos exist. Escapes happen. So while most reports are likely wrong, the idea is not impossible. This shows why a careful approach matters. Sometimes the simplest explanation is not boring. It is just real. Now, there is another class of compelling cases: animals that may be surviving after being declared extinct. The thylacine is one, but there are others. The ivory-billed woodpecker is often discussed in this way. Reports have continued after the bird was declared extinct. There have been blurry videos. There have been disputed sightings. Some experts believe it may survive. Others believe the evidence is not strong enough. This is compelling because it is about a known species and about the limits of searching. Now, move to lake monsters outside Loch Ness. Many lakes have their own monsters. Lake Champlain has Champ. Canada has Ogopogo. Some Scandinavian lakes have similar stories. Most of these can be explained by sturgeon, wave wakes, floating logs, groups of otters swimming in a line. A sturgeon can be very large. It can surface and roll. It can look like a serpent. So these cases are less compelling as unknown species, but they are compelling as repeated misreads of real animals. Now, consider a case that is often called compelling because it has physical traces: the skunk ape. This is a Bigfoot-like creature reported in Florida. Swamps are hard. Visibility is low. Sounds carry. Some photos exist. But the same Bigfoot problems apply. No body. Tracks can be hoaxed. Still, some people who live in the swamp report something large, so the file remains open. Now, consider a case from Australia: the Yowie. This is essentially an Australian Bigfoot. Reports exist. The land is vast. But Australia does not have native apes, so a large primate would be surprising. Still, Australia does have rugged terrain, and it has a long tradition of stories. The evidence is mostly testimony. So the Yowie is compelling as folklore, more than as a zoology case. Now, we can also include cases where the evidence has been clearly faked, but the story persists. This matters because it teaches us a rule. A strong story can survive weak evidence, so we must judge the evidence, not the fame. Now, we will do a focused run through a set of the most often cited compelling cases, and we will summarize why each one still matters. Bigfoot, compelling because of volume, long timeline, and some credible witnesses. Weak because no confirmed body and many hoaxes. Thylacine, compelling because it was real and could survive in remote terrain. Weak because no confirmed modern specimen. Orang Pendek, compelling because habitat could hide a small primate. and reports are consistent. Weak because no specimen or clear DNA. Loch Ness. Compelling because the setting is clear and the story is stable. Weak because biology and repeated searches argue against a giant unknown animal. Big cats in places they should not be. Compelling because escapes and rare individuals are possible. Weak because photos are usually poor and misidentification is common. Ivory-billed woodpecker. Compelling because habitat exists and some reports continue. Weak because evidence has not reached consensus. Now, there is a final case category that often gets called compelling, but we must handle it carefully. The cases that involve fear and trauma. For example, werewolf-like creatures. Dogmen, goatmen. These reports can be vivid, but they often lack physical evidence and often overlap with sleep paralysis, drugs, fear, and folklore. So we will not treat those as strong zoology cases. Now, as the night gets later, we can ask a simple question. If you wanted to actually prove a cryptid exists, what would you do? You would not start with a movie. You would not start with an internet forum. You would start with a plan. Camera traps in a region with repeated reports. Bait if ethical and legal. Tracking after fresh weather events. DNA collection from hair or scat with clean handling. Independent lab testing. Clear documentation. This is how wildlife biology works. Now, you may notice something. The most compelling cryptid cases often fade when strict method enters, because method is heavy. It requires time, it requires money, it requires patience. And many cryptid stories happen in places and lives where those resources are limited. So the stories continue. Now we will gently revisit why humans care about cryptids at all. They are not only about animals, they are about boundaries. The boundary between wilderness and home. The boundary between known and unknown. The boundary between science and story. When you live in a world that feels mapped and measured, a cryptid is a reminder that mapping is never complete. Now, in the last part of the file, we will do a calm synthesis. What is the most honest statement about compelling cryptid cases? It is this. A small number of cases are plausible. Survival cases like thylacine or rare birds are plausible. Out-of-place animal cases like big cats are plausible. Unknown primate cases in dense forests are plausible. But the biggest, most dramatic claims, like dinosaurs in modern swamps or giant plesiosaurs in a single lake, face strong barriers. Now that does not mean every dramatic claim is false. It means it is expensive to prove. And until proven, it remains a story. So what remains after we strip away hoaxes and mistakes? We are left with a handful of questions. Did the thylacines survive in small numbers? Are there unknown small primates in certain forests? Are some Bigfoot reports based on a rare and unknown animal? Or are they a cultural mirror? Are some lake monster sightings simply big fish and wave effects? And how often do humans misread nature? These questions are worth holding. They keep the mind humble. They remind us that the world is still bigger than our maps. Now, let the files close one by one. The forest file, the mountain file, the lake file, the island file, the swamp file, each one left with a few pages that still feel heavy. And as you rest, remember that uncertainty can be gentle. You do not need to solve everything tonight. You only need to let the stories settle. Now, because this episode is meant to be a real archive record, we need more than a list. We need the texture of the best cases, the way the evidence appears in real life. and the way normal explanations compete with mystery. So we will slow down and walk through a handful of cases in fuller detail. Begin again with the Bigfoot file, but focus on the kinds of reports that investigators consider strongest. One strong report type is the daylight sighting at close range. A person driving a rural road in late afternoon sees a figure step out. It is not a flash in the headlights. It is not a shadow. It is a few seconds of clear shape. A tall figure, dark hair, a long stride. Then it crosses the road and disappears. When multiple people in a vehicle see the same thing, this becomes more compelling, because it reduces the chance of a single imagination. Still, it does not remove misidentification. A human can wear a suit, a bear can appear upright, and distance can change scale. So the best daylight sightings are those where the witness is close enough to describe details: face shape, shoulder width, arm length, hand movement, and those details are often missing. Another strong report type is the track line, a sequence of prints that continue for a distance, not one print, a line. If the prints are consistent, show depth, and show a natural stride, they are harder to fake, but not impossible. A determined hoaxer can do it, and there have been hoaxes. So, for tracks to matter, chain of custody matters. Who found them? When they were photographed? Whether casts were taken? Whether the area was preserved? In many Bigfoot cases, that chain breaks. A person posts a photo online. No scale, no location, no follow-up, so it becomes useless. This is one reason Bigfoot remains compelling but unproven. The evidence exists in the wrong form. Now consider the famous film again, the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin footage. People who argue it shows a real creature point to: the gait, the way the knees bend, the way the arms swing, the way muscles seems to shift. They also point to the idea that in 1967, a suit of that quality would be hard to make. People who argue it is a hoax point to the possibility of a suit, the lack of a body afterward, and the fact that the film can never be verified. So the film remains compelling, but trapped. It can be argued forever. It cannot settle the case. Now, if Bigfoot were real, why would it be so hard to prove? A few practical reasons are often offered. First, a rare animal leaves rare bodies. Second, scavengers remove bodies. Third, the habitat is wide and hard. Fourth, humans do not search with the intensity they think they do. This is true in a general way, but it still does not explain the total absence of confirmed remains. So, the Bigfoot file, in the most honest form, ends like this: compelling patterns, no final proof. Now we move to the thylacine file with the same seriousness. The thylacine has something Bigfoot does not: a known baseline. We know what it looks like. We know its range. We know it was hunted. We know it went extinct in the official record. So the question becomes simple. Did it survive? The best thylacine reports often include striping on the rear, a stiff tail, a dog-like but unusual head, a way of moving that does not match a fox. Some witnesses say the animal was not running like a dog. It held its body differently. There have been occasional photos and videos claimed to show a thylacine. Most are too blurry. Some likely show dogs. So the evidence does not cross the line. But the case remains compelling because Tasmania has large remote spaces, and because extinction is not a switch, it is a process. A species can become extremely rare. It can persist in pockets, and it can leave only occasional sightings. If you wanted to prove a surviving thylacine, you would focus on remote camera trap grids, scat sampling, and long-term study. The reason this has not produced proof may be that the species is gone, or it may be that the search has not been deep enough. So, the thylacine remains one of the most compelling cases for a simple reason. It is possible. Now move to the ivory-billed woodpecker file. This is another survival case, and it shows how difficult the last step is. The bird is large. It lives in bottomland forests. It is hard to see. When people report it, they often describe a large black bird with white wing patches, a certain wing beat, a certain call. There have been disputed recordings. There have been disputed videos. Some experts accept them, others do not. This case is compelling because it sits on the edge of what is plausible. A small population could survive, but it is also a warning. Even when a species is known, and even when people are looking, proof can still be hard. Now let us move to Orang Pendek again and treat it with more care. Sumatra is one of the places in the world where humans and wildlife overlap in thick, complex ways. The rainforest is loud, insects, birds, rain, leaves. Visibility is often only a few meters. A small primate could move unseen. Local reports describe a creature that is not simply an orangutan. Orangutans are large and move in trees. Orang Pendek is described as smaller and more upright on the ground. Some reports describe a broad face. Some describe a strong smell. Some describe a quiet, fast walk. Researchers have tried to collect footprint evidence. As with Bigfoot, footprints are imperfect, but the habitat makes the idea plausible. Still, without DNA or a body, the file remains open. Now we can add another unknown primate-style case, the Almas of Central Asia. Often described as a wildman, reports exist, folklore exists, but the evidence is largely stories, so it is less compelling as a physical case than Orang Pendek. Now, return to the lake monster class with a clearer eye. People love lake monsters because lakes feel like closed boxes. A lake has a shoreline. It feels like you could search it, but water is deceptive. Refraction changes size. Waves hide shapes. Distance compresses. A log can roll and look alive. A line of otters can look like humps. A sturgeon can surface and create a serpent profile. So, lake monsters remain compelling because they create repeated experiences of the uncanny, even when the cause is normal. Now we can include one more case that often gets called compelling because it may involve known animals, but the reports persist. The British Big Cat File. There have been sightings, paw prints, reports of livestock kills, and occasional claims of camera images. In some areas, it is realistic that a small number of exotic cats escaped. This could create years of reports. A single animal can live for a long time, and if multiple escapes happen over time, the story can remain active. So this case is compelling because it requires only a small departure from normal. It does not require a new species. Now we add a case from the deep ocean. The idea of unknown large sea animals is not foolish. The deep ocean is the least explored habitat on Earth. New species are found. Large animals are filmed. So the question is not, can unknown animals exist? They can. The question is, do specific sea monster reports point to unknown animals? Most do not. Most point to whales, sharks, and oarfish. But a small number of reports may involve rare, poorly understood animals. So, ocean cryptids are compelling in a general way, but hard to assign to a specific named monster. Now, because this is an episode about the most compelling cases in the world, we should also address an uncomfortable truth. Some of the most famous cryptid cases are famous because they are entertaining, not because they are strong. A case can be famous and weak, and a case can be unknown and strong. So the best list is not the loudest list. Now, in the quiet archive, we can offer a more careful short list of the strongest categories. Category 1. Survival cryptids. Animals declared extinct that may persist. Thylacine. Rare birds. Small pockets of known species. These are compelling because biology allows them. Category 2. Out-of-place animals. Big cats in unexpected places. Exotic escapes. Rare wanderers. These are compelling because they require only rare events. Category 3. Unknown primate cases in dense forests. Orang Pendek. Some Bigfoot-style reports. These are compelling because forests can hide large mammals, but they are weak because proof is missing. Category 4. Place-bound legends like Loch Ness. Compelling as repeated experiences. Weak as unknown species claims. Now, we can also say what is least compelling. The claims that require a huge new animal population with no bodies. The claims that require modern dinosaurs with no bones. The claims that change shape from one report to the next. These can be powerful stories, but they do not carry much weight. Now, to close the episode properly, we will turn the key once. A cryptid case becomes compelling when it teaches you to be careful with your own certainty. It reminds you that the world can still surprise you, but it also reminds you that surprise is not proof. So, if you ever hear a new case, you can ask 3 simple questions. What is the best physical trace? How was it collected? And what normal explanation was tested and ruled out? If those questions have solid answers, the case grows heavier. If they do not, it stays light. Now let the table of files fade back into shadow. Let the forest file settle. Let the mountain file settle. Let the lake file settle. Let the island file settle. And let the ocean file settle. The world remains wide. The night remains deep. And the archive remains open, waiting for better evidence. Before the file closes, there are a few more cases that deserve careful mention, because they sit near the line. Not the line of certainty, the line of plausibility. First, consider the so-called mysterious big cats again, but this time in the Americas. In many parts of the United States and Canada, people report cats that do not match the local species. Sometimes the reports describe a cougar in a place where cougars are not supposed to be. Sometimes they describe a black cat. Sometimes they describe an animal with a long tail and a low stalking walk. If the report is simply, "I saw a big cat," then a known cougar is the likely answer. Cougars can travel. A young male can roam long distances, so a sighting outside the expected range can be real. This makes these cases compelling, because they are often true, just not exotic. The black cat reports are harder. A black cougar is not established as a normal animal in North America, so black cat sightings often point to misidentification, lighting and shadow, or an escaped exotic animal. An escaped animal is rare, but it happens. So, while most Black Panther stories are likely wrong, the category remains compelling because it requires only one escape to produce a real case. Now, consider another survival-style case. The idea of surviving giant birds. In some places, people report large birds that seem too big. Sometimes these are condors. Sometimes they are eagles. Sometimes they are cranes seen close. But there are also rare birds that migrate in unexpected ways. So, again, the most compelling version of the case is not a new species. It is a rare sight of a known one. Now, Consider a case where modern technology has helped reduce uncertainty. Environmental DNA, the eDNA method. In lakes and rivers, you can test water for animal traces. This has been used to look for unknown fish. It has been proposed for lake monster cases. The important lesson is not whether it proves Nessie. The lesson is that cryptid questions can be tested, and when they are tested, many become clearer. Now, consider the Chupacabra file as a lesson in how a compelling case can change shape. In Puerto Rico in the 1990s, reports described a strange upright creature. Later, in the United States, the name was applied to hairless canids. DNA tests often showed coyotes and dogs. So the most compelling evidence in that file is not a monster body. It is the lab proof that the label is being used for known animals. This is important because it shows how a cryptid can become two different things. A story about livestock fear and a story about sick animals being mistaken for something else. Now consider the Mothman file again. It is not compelling as a zoology case, but it is compelling as a social case because it shows how a cluster of sightings can form and how a symbol can grow. In a short period, a community can build a shared image, a winged figure, red eyes, sense of threat. Even if the underlying cause was an owl or another bird, the experience was real to the witnesses, and the way the story formed is worth recording. Now, there is another kind of compelling case that does not involve a creature at all. The case of misread remains. Sometimes a beach animal washes up. It is decayed. It looks strange. Photos spread. People call it a sea monster. Then scientists examine it, and it becomes a whale, a shark, or a known fish. This is compelling because it shows the gap between appearance and identity. Now, because this episode is about the world, we should include at least one case from each major region where possible, but without turning it into a long catalogue with no depth. From North America, Bigfoot and survival cases. From Europe, Loch Ness and out-of-place big cats. From Asia, Yeti and orang Pendek. From Australia, thylacine. From Africa, the hardest cases, mostly folklore, because strong evidence is rare. From South America, the myth, heavy cases, and the modern legends like Chupacabra that spread. Now, a careful listener might ask, if so many cases are weak, why are they called compelling? Because compelling does not mean true. It means the case has some ingredient that holds attention even when skepticism is applied. And that ingredient is usually one of three things: a realistic possibility of survival, a realistic possibility of out-of-place animals, or a long pattern of credible human reports. Now let us give the archive one more honest list, not of monsters, but of the best evidence moments. A confirmed DNA test of a strange animal that turns out to be a known one. A clear historical record of a species decline, followed by modern sightings. A consistent set of footprints collected responsibly. A repeated pattern of sightings in one region by independent witnesses. Those are the building blocks. Now, for the final minutes of this record, we will take a quieter tone. Because part of why people listen to cryptid stories is not the creature. It is the mood. A road at night, a tree line, fog on water, a distant call, a feeling that something is watching. These are human experiences. They are old. And they do not need a real monster to be real experiences. So the archive respects them, but it also keeps the label clear. An experience is not proof. A proof requires a trace that can be tested. So, if you want to think of tonight as a map, think of it like this. At the center, the known world. Around it, the edge where rare events live. And beyond that, the fog where stories fill gaps. The most compelling cryptid cases live on that edge, close enough to touch the known world, far enough to stay uncertain. Now the table clears, the papers stack, the light lowers, and the last thing we keep is not a creature. It is a method. Be curious, be kind, and be strict with evidence. One more slow detail, because it matters. Most cryptid debates fail because people argue at different levels. One person argues about a specific sighting. Another argues about the entire idea. So the archive separates them. A single sighting can be unexplained and still not prove a species. A species can be possible and still not be present in any specific case. This is why a careful approach feels slower, but it is cleaner. Now, think about what a real discovery would look like. It would probably not look like a dramatic monster reveal. It would look like a blurry camera trap image that becomes clearer with a second camera, a hair sample with roots that yields clean DNA, a scat sample that matches no known species, a set of bones found by accident and then documented properly. That is how science usually moves. Quietly, piece by piece. Now, there is also a reason the most compelling cases often involve mammals. Mammals leave tracks. They leave hair. They leave scat. They breathe air. They come close to people. This means evidence can exist. But it also means that if the mammal were common, it would be found. So the most plausible unknown mammals would be rare. And rare is hard. Now, because this is a sleep story, we will let the final section become soft. Imagine the places where these stories live. A logging road with fresh mud, a river with dark water under reeds, a mountain pass with wind over snow, a swamp where sound echoes, a rainforest where the air is thick, a loch where fog sits low. In every place, something moves. Sometimes it is known, sometimes it is not, and sometimes it only feels unknown because the light is poor and the mind is tired. That is the shared truth of cryptid cases. They live where humans are not fully in control. Now, the most compelling cases in the world, if we strip away names, are simply the cases where a witness saw an animal clearly enough to be shaken. A trace was left behind, and the trace did not collapse immediately into an easy answer. Those cases are rare, but they exist. Even if the final answer is normal, the moment of uncertainty is real. Now let the last thought be simple. The world is still large. There are still animals we do not fully understand. There are still places we do not fully watch. So it is reasonable to keep a small space for the unknown. But it is also wise to keep that space quiet and to fill it only with evidence when evidence arrives. The night can hold both wonder and discipline, and with that balance, the archive can rest. And if you want a final shortlist, one that matches the phrase most compelling, here is the most honest version. Most compelling survival case, the thylacine. Because it was real, it lived in a real place, and the wilderness could hide a small last pocket. Most compelling, unknown primate-style case, orang pendek. Because the habitat is dense, and because the reports are often stable and grounded. Most compelling mass witness folklore case, Bigfoot. Because of volume, because of time depth, and because some witnesses are credible and calm. Most compelling place-bound legend, Loch Ness. Because the setting is constant, the story is stable, and nature in that setting can create repeating strange sights. Most compelling modern legend case study, the chupacabra. Because it shows how real animal deaths, media, and tested bodies can combine into a story that changes shape. And if you listen to that list, you can hear the pattern. The compelling cases are the ones that do not require a miracle. They require only a rare survivor, a rare animal hidden by terrain, a rare escape, or a repeated misread in a place that tricks the eye. Now, we leave the list behind, because the point of the archive is not to win an argument, it is to keep the record clean, so that when a real discovery comes, it has a place to land. Now the room goes quiet. The last pages turn. The lamp warms the paper. And outside, in forests and swamps and water, the real animals keep moving. Some known, some still unknown, and most simply unseen. One last practical note, because it matters for every case. The best evidence often disappears for boring reasons. A footprint dries out. A rainstorm washes it. A carcass is buried. A sample is handled with bare hands. A photo is taken without scale. A witness talks to 10 people, and the memory shifts. So when we say a case is compelling, we are often saying, the case had enough time to be recorded, and enough care to be kept. Most do not. Now, imagine a farmer who finds strange tracks near a pen. They have chores. They have work. They do not have time to call a lab. So the tracks become a story and then vanish. Imagine a hiker who sees a large figure on a ridge. They are scared. They freeze. They do not think to film. So the sight becomes a memory and then a report. Imagine a fisherman who sees a long shape in a lake. The water is moving. The light is low. The moment is short. So it becomes a monster story. These are human situations, and because they are human, they repeat. This is why cryptid cases will likely never end. Not because monsters are everywhere, but because uncertainty is everywhere. Now, let that be soothing instead of stressful. You do not need the world to be fully solved to be safe. You only need to know that most things have ordinary causes, and that the rare unknown, when it exists, will eventually leave a trace. So we end the record in peace. The questions remain, but they do not need to press on you tonight. They can sit in the archive. They can wait. And as a final quiet image, picture a map of the world. Not the political map, the habitat map. Dark green forests, white mountains, blue lakes, blue oceans, grey swamps, and small warm dots of human towns. Cryptid stories gather where those dots meet the wild. A road near a forest, a village near a river, a ranch near open land, a boat crossing dark water. This is where people look out and see something that does not fit. Sometimes it is just an animal at a strange angle. Sometimes it is an animal where it should not be. Sometimes it is a real, rare survivor. And sometimes it is only fear wearing a shape. So the most compelling cryptid cases are not a proof of monsters. They are a proof of edges, the edge of wilderness, the edge of knowledge, and the edge of the human mind. Now, let those edges soften. Let the map fade. Let the room become quiet again. If you wake tomorrow and try to remember the strongest idea from tonight, let it be this. When a case is compelling, it is usually compelling for a reason that is simple. It is not magic. It is not a perfect secret. It is one of these. The place is hard to search. The animal could be rare. The animal could be a known species surviving quietly. Or the evidence is just good enough to resist an easy answer. That is all, and that is enough. Because even that small space for the unknown can make the world feel wider. Now, let the mind stop reaching. Let the questions loosen their grip. Let the dark outside be only dark, not a threat. And let sleep come the way it should. slowly, softly, without proof. The last page of this file is not a monster drawing, it is a checklist. If you ever want to judge a new cryptid claim, ask, was there a clear photo or only a story? Was there a trace with scale? Was there a sample with clean handling? Was there an expert examination? Was there repeat activity in the same area? And did the claim stay stable over time? If the answers are mostly no, the case is light. If the answers are mostly yes, the case grows heavy. Now the checklist can go back into the folder. The folder can go back on the shelf. And you can go back to rest. And as the lights dim, remember, most forests hold only deer and bears and birds. Most lakes hold only fish and wind. Most mountains hold only stone and snow. But once in a while, a rare animal moves through. And once in a while, a human sees it and carries the story home. That is enough for an archive. That is enough for a night. The shelf is quiet now. The questions are folded away. Only breathing remains, slow and steady, in the dark, as the world turns quietly, far outside, tonight. This was a quiet archive story, where the story ends, sleep begins,